There's a certain kind of wound that doesn't leave blood behind. It doesn't scream. It doesn't even show up on your skin, but it cuts into something sacred within you. That wound is called disrespect. You've felt it. When someone cuts you off mid-sentence. When your ideas are brushed aside like dust. When your kindness is mistaken for weakness. And maybe worst of all, when you stay silent. Machiavelli would have called that silence a mistake. Not because you failed to fight back, but because your silence gave permission. Disrespect is like a weed. Feed it once with your silence, and it takes root in your identity. It starts small, but it spreads. And soon, it's not just about how others see you, it's about how you see yourself. This isn't just ego, this is power. And the moment you let disrespect live unchecked, it begins to define you. So today, we step into Machiavelli's mind to learn how to kill disrespect before it kills you. You've been raised on the idea that kindness is the highest virtue. Be soft-spoken, turn the other cheek, don't cause trouble, and while there is grace in those ideas, there's also danger. Because when kindness is handed to a world that only respects strength, that kindness becomes worthless currency. It becomes invisible. And when you become invisible, people stop treating you as someone to be respected. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He didn't write The Prince for saints. He wrote it for survivors, those betrayed, outnumbered, stripped of power but hungry for understanding. He saw a world where good men weren't destroyed because they lacked virtue, but because they lacked strategy. He wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you must choose." And most people misunderstand this. He wasn't telling you to become cruel. He was telling you to become undeniable. In his world, fear wasn't about violence. It was about boundaries. It was about cultivating a presence so steady, so unshakable, that people thought twice before ever crossing you. And that lesson carries perfectly into today's world. You may not rule a kingdom, but you rule something just as important: your time, your space, your energy. And if you don't guard those gates, they will be trampled. Think of respect like a mirror. It doesn't reflect what you hope for. It reflects what you show it. Stand tall, and it reflects dignity. Bow too quickly, and it reflects something lesser, and people respond accordingly. The problem is disrespect often comes disguised as harmless, a joke at your expense, a compliment dripping with condescension, a decision made about you without your voice in the room. And most of the time, you brush it off. You laugh along. You stay silent, not because you don't notice, but because you don't want the confrontation. Or worse, because you doubt whether you deserve more. But every time you accept less, you train others to give you less. Not because they're cruel, but because human nature is opportunistic. People push boundaries unconsciously, and when they find no resistance, they push further. Machiavelli's metaphors of the lion and the fox weren't just for rulers. They're for anyone navigating power in daily life. The fox sees the traps, the false praise, the manipulative flattery, the fake civility hiding quiet domination. The lion doesn't roar at every threat. It simply stands tall. Presence alone is enough. Translated into today's world, this means mastering the art of non-reaction. Not every insult requires war, but every insult requires awareness. You don't always need to call it out, but you always need to adjust. You limit access. You stop sharing pieces of yourself with people who treat them carelessly. You don't beg for respect. You withdraw until respect becomes the only option left. Real power doesn't scream. It doesn't thrash around. Real power is quiet. It's the stillness that unsettles, the calm that demands attention without asking for it. Because here's the truth. People don't respond to your inner world. They respond to the signals you send. Confidence, value, strength. These aren't things you say. They're things you embody. And in today's world, where everyone is desperate to be liked, chasing validation as if it's currency, true self-respect has become rare. But here's the paradox. Rare things are valuable, and valuable things are treated differently. So how do you shift the dynamic? You start by redefining kindness. True kindness doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. It means being selective about where and to whom you give it. It means generosity with discernment. Compassion without becoming exploitable. Machiavelli would tell you this: your value rises the moment you stop trying to prove it. Stop explaining your worth. Stop apologizing for existing. Stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Because when you're anchored in your dignity, you no longer chase external confirmation. And people will feel it. They'll speak more carefully. They'll listen more closely. Not because you demanded respect, but because your presence silently commands it. And that's where disrespect dies. Not with retaliation, but with unwavering self-respect. Disrespect isn't always loud. It doesn't always arrive as an insult or a blatant act of betrayal. More often, it's subtle, hidden in gestures, tones, or silence itself. It shows up in the friend who makes a joke at your expense while everyone laughs, in the colleague who makes decisions that affect you without ever consulting you, in the family member who constantly interrupts you as if your words don't matter. And most of the time, you let it slide. You laugh along. You shrug it off. You tell yourself it's not worth the trouble. But every time you do, you're teaching people how far they can go. Not because they're evil, but because human nature is wired to test boundaries. People probe, they push, and when they meet no resistance, they assume it's safe to keep going. Machiavelli's lesson was clear. If you don't set the tone, others will. If you don't protect your ground, others will walk across it as if it's theirs. This is where the lion and the fox come in. The fox sees through the masks. It notices the intentions behind the smile, the trap inside the flattery, the insult hidden in politeness. The lion doesn't waste energy roaring at every challenge. It simply exists with such undeniable strength that no one dares to cross it without thinking twice. Together, the lion and the fox form a balance. One recognizes the games people play. The other refuses to be moved by them. And this is the art you must practice in your own life. Not reacting to every slight, but never ignoring them either. Silence doesn't always mean tolerance. Sometimes silence is power. The key is awareness. When someone disrespects you, you don't always need to argue. You don't always need to call it out. But you must always adjust. That may mean limiting access to your energy, reducing how much of yourself you share, or stepping back entirely until respect is the only way they can engage with you. Power, in its purest form, is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. When you know who you are, when you decide you will not tolerate disrespect, your silence becomes a language. People sense it in the way you carry yourself, in the pauses between your words, in the firmness of your gaze. Machiavelli understood that human psychology is simple. People respond to signals, confidence, value, authority. These are not things you tell people about yourself. They are things you embody. And once embodied, they radiate outward like heat from a fire. Look around at today's world. Most people are obsessed with being liked. They chase likes on social media, approval from peers, validation from strangers. They bend, shrink, and shape themselves just to fit the mold of acceptance. But the truth is this: the more you chase validation, the less respect you command, because people sense desperation. And desperation never commands dignity. It invites exploitation. Respect, real respect, begins the moment you stop asking for it. So how do you begin? By redefining kindness. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's weakness disguised as virtue. Real kindness is a choice, not a default. It means giving generously, but only to those who value it. It means showing compassion, but never allowing yourself to be used. Machiavelli would tell you this: your worth multiplies the moment you stop trying to explain it, the moment you no longer apologize for existing, the moment you stop shrinking to keep the peace. Think about it. Every time you say sorry, when no apology is needed, you chip away at your dignity. Every time you minimize yourself to make someone else feel comfortable, you lose ground in your own kingdom. But when you stand rooted in your self-respect, everything changes. People sense it instantly. They measure their words more carefully. They listen more closely. They realize that your attention, your presence, your energy is not something to be taken lightly. And this shift is not arrogance. It's alignment. Alignment with the truth that your time is sacred, your voice is valuable, and your heart is not a playground for careless people. So here's the paradox. Disrespect doesn't end when you retaliate. Disrespect ends when you refuse to live in spaces where it can survive. It ends when you stop explaining yourself to those who never deserve the explanation in the first place. It ends when you walk away without bitterness, because you've chosen self-respect over approval. This is what Machiavelli knew. The world is not fair, but it is predictable. And those who understand the laws of human behavior, who master the art of when to speak, when to stay silent, when to walk away, move through life with precision and peace. The ultimate act of power isn't revenge. It's removal. And when you begin to live this way, you'll notice something extraordinary. The world shifts around you. Some people will rise to meet your new standard. Others will fall away. Either way, you win. Because the first step to killing disrespect is this: you must stop disrespecting yourself. Here's where the challenge deepens. It's one thing to handle disrespect from strangers or coworkers, but what about when it comes from the people closest to you? What do you do when disrespect comes from the one you love? From family you cannot escape? From the friend who's been in your life for years? Walking away from strangers is easy. Cutting ties with casual acquaintances doesn't shake your soul. But when the wound carries a familiar face, everything inside you hesitates. Because part of you still wants to be chosen. Part of you still hopes they'll change. And that's the trap. That hope, that your patience will one day teach them your worth, is the very lie that keeps you stuck. Machiavelli understood this. He warned that sentimentality placed above sovereignty destroys rulers. And it destroys ordinary people too. Disrespect doesn't always arrive as yelling or insults. Sometimes it's in being forgotten, being the last one considered, the first one blamed, being overlooked again and again until your soul quietly corrodes. And you might excuse it. You tell yourself they didn't mean it, that it wasn't intentional. But intention is irrelevant. Impact is what matters. A cut still bleeds, even if the blade slipped by accident. This is where most people fail. They wait until the disrespect becomes undeniable, until it screams in their face. But by then, it's too late. By then, their self-worth has already been dissolved drop by drop, moment by moment. So how do you act earlier? How do you catch it before the damage is done? You listen to the silence between the moments. You pay attention to how you feel when you leave someone's presence. Do you feel lighter or heavier? Do you feel more like yourself or less? The world rarely disrespects you suddenly. It disrespects you gradually, testing your edges, waiting to see if you flinch. And when you don't, it digs deeper. Not always out of cruelty, but because you've trained it to believe your boundaries are suggestions, not rules. Now imagine a different way of living. Imagine that every boundary you set was rooted not in fear, but in love for yourself. Imagine you corrected disrespect not with anger, but with clarity. Imagine you walked away, not because they rejected you, but because you rejected the version of yourself that begged for scraps of worth. This is where philosophy meets practice. Self-respect stops being an idea and becomes a discipline. Every time you choose not to over-explain your boundaries, you strengthen them. Every time you walk away from someone who won't listen, you reinforce your own value. Every time you refuse to negotiate your dignity for the illusion of peace, you step back into the role of ruler in your own life. And make no mistake, you are always training the world. With every yes, every no, every silence, you are teaching people how to treat you. And even more importantly, you are teaching yourself. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He knew the mind justifies what the heart tolerates. He knew people remain in places that quietly destroy them because they build narratives to survive it. They call it loyalty. They call it love. They call it family. But is loyalty still a virtue when it costs you your dignity? When your identity must shrink just to fit inside the room, is the room sacred? Or is it a prison decorated with nostalgia? The lion does not live in cages. The fox does not return to snares. So, you must ask yourself, where am I tolerating what should have ended long ago? Who am I letting speak to me in ways I'd never accept from a stranger? And why? The answer, more often than not, is fear. Not fear of confrontation, but fear of abandonment. You worry that if you assert yourself, they'll leave. That if you demand respect, you'll be alone. But here is the liberating truth. The people who disappear when you begin to respect yourself are the very people who benefited from your lack of respect. Their absence is not a loss, it is a clearing. A clearing where real respect can finally grow. The strongest form of power isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It's the stillness of someone who would rather stand alone than be surrounded by those who diminish them. This is where Machiavelli's wisdom becomes personal. It's no longer about kingdoms and rulers. It's about the state of your own inner kingdom. Are you ruling with intention or letting others write the laws of your territory? Are you guarding your crown or letting it fall each time someone disapproves? Because every time you let someone talk over you, every time you swallow your feelings to avoid conflict, every time you laugh along when you're the punchline, you give away another brick from the foundation of your castle. But here's the beautiful truth. The castle can be rebuilt any day, any moment, even right now. And rebuilding begins with a choice. Disrespect has no place here. Not because you think you're better than anyone else, but because you finally remember your own value. You can be kind and firm. You can be loving and clear. You can be soft without being stepped on, and powerful without being cruel. This is the paradox of true strength. And once you embody it, the world will respond. People may not always like you when you change, but they will respect you. And respect true. Respect is worth more than approval ever was. There's a hard truth most people avoid. Disrespect often doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you love the most. And that's why it hurts so deeply. Because part of you still craves recognition from them. Part of you still wants to be chosen by them. That small, stubborn hope keeps you in the cycle, waiting for the day they'll finally see your worth. But Machiavelli would cut through the illusion with ruthless clarity. Waiting for them to change is a waste of your sovereignty. A ruler who prioritizes sentiment over self-preservation destroys himself. And so does anyone who keeps tolerating small acts of disrespect just because of history, family ties, or romantic bonds. Disrespect doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It's being excluded from decisions that affect you. It's being forgotten when it matters. It's being taken for granted again and again until your dignity is worn thin, and you excuse it. You say, "They didn't mean it." But the truth is, intention is irrelevant. Impact is the only currency that matters. A cut still bleeds, whether the blade slipped accidentally or was swung with force. Too many people wait for disrespect to become undeniable before they act. By then, it's already corroded their self-worth, drop by drop, moment by moment. The question is, how do you recognize it earlier? By tuning into your own experience. By asking, do I feel lighter or heavier after being around them? Do I feel more like myself or less? Do I walk away with energy or with emptiness? Because the world rarely disrespects you all at once. It does so gradually. It starts small, testing your edges, and if you don't respond, it digs deeper. Now picture this. Imagine every boundary you set was rooted not in fear of loss, but in love for yourself. Imagine correcting disrespect not with anger, but with calm clarity. Imagine leaving not because someone rejected you, but because you rejected the smaller version of yourself who had to beg for worth. That's what true self-respect looks like. It's not an emotion. It's a practice. Every time you refuse to over-explain, you fortify your boundaries. Every time you walk away from someone who doesn't listen, you tell your soul it matters. Every time you stop trading dignity for temporary peace, you take back your crown. And here's the truth. You are always training the world. With every yes, every no, every silence, you're teaching others how to treat you, and even more importantly, you're teaching yourself. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. He observed that people cling to destructive situations not because they enjoy pain, but because they've built stories to justify staying. They say, "This is love." They say, "This is family." They say, "This is loyalty." But ask yourself if loyalty costs your self-respect. Is it still a virtue? If your identity must shrink to stay inside a room, is the room sacred? Or is it just a prison covered in familiar paint? The lion does not live in cages. The fox does not return to snares. And you are not meant to live in places that demand your silence as the price of admission. Here's where the fear comes in. The reason most people stay silent, it's not because they don't see the disrespect. It's because they fear abandonment. They think, if I speak up, they'll leave. But here's the paradox. The people who vanish when you begin to respect yourself are the very ones who thrived on your lack of self-respect. Their departure is not a tragedy, it's a cleansing. It's the emptying of the room so the right people can finally walk in. The ones who won't flinch when you stand firm. The ones who won't punish you for having a spine. The ones who see your boundaries not as rejection, but as a mark of value. But those people can only find you once you stop hiding inside people-pleasing. Once you become the kind of person who would rather be alone than surrounded by those who diminish you. This is strength at its highest level. Not noise, not aggression, but stillness. A self-respect so steady it cannot be shaken. Machiavelli's wisdom becomes intimate here. It's not about kings and kingdoms anymore. It's about the state of your inner kingdom. Are you the ruler, setting laws with clarity? Or are you the subject, bowing to the moods and disrespect of others? Every time you let someone cut you off mid-sentence, you hand away a brick from your castle. Every time you swallow your anger to keep the peace, you trade part of your crown for temporary approval. Every time you let a joke at your expense slide, you surrender a piece of your throne. But here's the beauty. You can rebuild. At any time. At any moment. It begins the instant you decide, disrespect has no home here. Not because you think you're better than others, but because you finally remember your own worth. Here is the final truth. Killing disrespect doesn't begin with the world around you. It begins inside of you, because every time you allow it, you are the first to disrespect yourself. Every time you stay silent when you wanted to speak, every time you laugh at a joke where you were the punchline, every time you remain in places that shrink you, you are teaching yourself that your worth is negotiable. But the moment you decide otherwise, everything changes. Machiavelli, often painted as cruel, was never really advocating for cruelty. He was advocating for clarity. He wasn't calling for you to be ruthless to others. He was demanding that you stop being ruthless to yourself. He would tell you, if you do not command respect, you will be ruled by those who do. And that command begins in the smallest of moments. When you choose not to explain your boundaries, when you refuse to over-apologize, when you say no without guilt, when you let people walk away instead of begging them to stay. These aren't just small gestures. They're the foundations of sovereignty. Think about it. The world can misunderstand you. They can call your standards ego. They can label your solitude arrogance. They can twist your boundaries into rejection. Let them, because none of it matters once you know the truth. You are not cruel, you are clear, and clarity is your revolution. Clarity is how you protect the kingdom of your soul. Clarity is how you kill disrespect at the root. Clarity is how you stop confusing silence with strength, when that silence is really fear. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must learn how not to be good, when goodness is the very thing leading to his downfall. In your life, this means there will be moments where survival demands defiance, peace demands detachment, dignity demands courage. Not to be liked, but to be respected. Respect doesn't come from perfection. It comes from presence. It's the way you walk into a room without begging for approval. It's the way you hold eye contact when you say no. It's the way you let people leave and you don't chase them because you know your value doesn't live in their recognition. That is how disrespect dies, not through noise or retaliation, but by building yourself up so completely that no one dares diminish you. And if they try, they simply lose access. This is the turning point. Not a moment of rage, but a moment of remembering. Remembering that you were never meant to be tolerated, that you are not here to be palatable. You are here to be powerful, not power over others, power over yourself, power over your time, your mind, your energy, your soul. Because once you own yourself, no one else can put a price on you. And once you stop abandoning yourself, disrespect has nowhere left to live. So from this moment forward, let your silence be sacred, not submissive. Let your detachment be an act of love, not fear. Let your boundaries be the proof that you have returned to yourself. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to be seen. You don't need to beg to be respected. You simply need to embody what Machiavelli understood centuries ago. The world bends not to those who ask for respect, but to those who refuse to move without it. That is how you kill disrespect, not in a single strike, not in anger, but daily, quietly, with every boundary you draw, with every truth you speak, with every piece of yourself you stop abandoning. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a life where you no longer settle. Let them wonder why you've changed. Let them feel the absence of your old self. Let them sit with what they lost when you found your voice. Because in the end, the first person who must never disrespect you is you.